Hello, and thank you for contacting Wave Support. I see from your clinical request that you're struggling with this bifocal patient with both distance and near vision, as well as the lenses are decentering upward. Well, let's take a look at your designs here for a moment. If we look at the right eye for a moment, overall, in first glance, the fit actually looks pretty nice. One of the things I notice when we look at this cornea, though, you'll notice that there's some steepening down here in the inferior portion. If you look at this left eye, again, we still have a little more steepening sort of in this lower third. And because that, the lens will intuitively want to slide upward. I like to say slide up that northern slope or slide down the northern slope, if you will. And so it'll want to decenter a little bit more upward. And so if we look at your designs, when you imported the wave data, when you averaged the corneal astigmatism, you'll see you end up with a cornea that looks almost spherical, and it pretty much wiped out this inferior steepening and almost created more of a central steepening. So now the wave lens that you're designing now is actually matching this cornea as opposed to this one. So one of the things that I like to do sometimes if I have a cornea that looks like this, I won't average the astigmatism because it sort of cancels out this look. And so one of the things you can do when you import that lens is don't average the astigmatism. I'll show that to you in just a moment. One simple thought, if you're pretty happy though with this fit, is just beef up the thickness. Here I went up to 24, I think you're at 17. Just beef up the thickness, and that of course will help that lens drop down a little bit. And as you know from fitting some of these multifocal lenses, sometimes it's helpful to take the dominant eye and make that pupil slightly larger. Here I made it a little bit larger as opposed to being on pupil, just go a little bit larger on that eye, and then at the non-dominant eye, maybe keep it a little bit more right at the pupil size. The key is if you have this lens, if it's decentering upward, you're going to have a difficult time getting clarity no matter what you do until you get that lens to center well. So the key is getting it from moving around so much, get a little bit heavier so it drops down, and see if you can get it to center over that pupil. Now if you look at this lens I did here, what I basically did is I re-imported the data and I did not average it out this time. And you'll notice I've got a cornea now that looks a little bit more like this, where I've got a little bit more of a steepening down here near the inferior portion. And I think that'll give you a little bit better representation of that cornea when you design your lens. And just kind of a side note, what I've learned through experience through the years, sometimes when you average out these corneas, it really hides a lot of that corneal cylinder. So sometimes when you're trying to do toric lenses, or you might get some weird over refractions just because you've sort of created a different environment. You've eliminated you basically made a spherical cornea out of a toric one, and now sometimes Wave, when it creates a very accurate lens based on that data, it gives you some contradictory over refractions. So one of the things I've learned through the years, if you're getting weird over refractions that don't make sense, look back and see if you averaged out that cornea. Sometimes that is the root of the cause there, or the problem. If we look at this other eye here, once again you've got a nice looking lens here, but again it's got a very spherical looking lens. If you look, there's almost no corneal toricity here, whereas the cornea, you definitely have this oval vertical meridian. So if we look back over here, I imported the data again, and now you've got a cornea that much more closely represents that. And one thing you can also do when you get these asymmetric corneas, if you're really having trouble with the lens, sometimes you almost have to go to freeform, and you'll see what happens when I click on. Now if you recall, this is the back surface of that lens trying to match the surface here of the cornea. And if you go to freeform and kind of let it design up here for a moment, actually you can see it right there. Let me take that. Right away you get a pretty nice looking cornea where you get there, and you'll see this little aspheric tool sometimes even gives you a little bit more of a match. Here you got almost a perfect match on the back surface of this lens to the cornea. So I try quite often to avoid the freeform just because I don't want to make it too complicated. I like to keep it simple. But in this case, you've got a really nice looking back surface of this lens, and if you keep it thick enough, now you got a lens that's nice and thick, should center on that lens much more nicely. And then of course, don't forget, once you get those lenses centered, then you got a fighting chance of getting the distance and the near vision to clear up. Well, I hope you find that helpful or useful. I wish you well with this challenging case, and thank you for contacting Wave Support. Have a great day.